The studio lights were bright, the mood initially light, and the hosts of The View seemed eager to welcome Hollywood legend Denzel Washington to the table. But the energy shifted quickly once Sunny Hostin turned the conversation toward politics, pressing Denzel on his views about celebrity responsibility in America's cultural divide. "With your platform, don't you feel obligated to speak louder on systemic issues?" she asked pointedly. Denzel, calm but unmistakably firm, responded, "I don't shout to prove a point I build, I mentor. I serve. If that's not loud, enough, maybe you're listening for the wrong sound." The audience responded with a mix of cheers and tense silence. Sunny wasn't done. She pushed harder, questioning whether his measured approach was a form of silence. Denzel leaned back, then forward, and delivered the words that would go viral minutes later. "If you invited me here to box, I didn't bring gloves. I brought truth, but I don't spar for sport." He stood, unclipped his mic, looked directly into the camera, and added, "I'm done with this show." The room went silent as he walked off stage. No fanfare, just finality, backstage chaos erupted as producers scrambled and co-hosts awkwardly tried to pivot. Whoopi Goldberg, visibly shaken but professional, attempted to redirect the segment, while Joy Behar muttered something about misunderstood intentions, but the damage was done and the internet caught it all. Within the hour, Denzel's words trended across platforms, clips circulating with captions like "Denzel shuts it down" and "Masterclass in graceful exits." Commentary was swift and polarized. Some applauded Sunny Hostin for pushing the issue. Others declared Denzel's response the epitome of poise under pressure. Denzel himself didn't respond publicly, but his team issued a short, measured statement. Mr. Washington stands by his belief that dignity is not up for debate. That one line, unshaken, uncluttered, was all it took to affirm what viewers had already seen, a man walking away not out of anger, but out of principle. In the days that followed, The View faced both backlash and praise for the incident, depending on the lens of the critic. Media outlets debated whether the show had crossed a line from curiosity into confrontation. Some insiders hinted that the producers had hoped to provoke a viral moment, and if that was the goal, they got one. But not in the way they'd expected. Denzel's departure became more than just a dramatic TV moment. It became a touchstone for public figures navigating performative conversations. His silent exit spoke louder than any extended argument could, and without ever returning to the show or the topic, he shifted the conversation entirely. Where others tried to score points, he protected his peace. And in that quiet act of control, he delivered a lesson far more enduring than any scripted segment. Sometimes, the most powerful message is simply knowing when to leave. In the aftermath of Denzel Washington's walk-off, The View underwent subtle yet noticeable changes. The next few episodes opened with toned-down energy, and Sunny Hostin, though unapologetic, adopted a more cautious posture in interviews. Guest bookings grew more curated, and producers quietly issued new briefing guidelines. Meanwhile, Denzel's walkout had become something more than a clip. It became a cultural checkpoint. Media, commentators, celebrities, and scholars dissected the moment not as an explosion, but as a reclamation of dignity. Unlike the usual viral meltdowns that flood social feeds, Denzel hadn't stormed out in anger or rage. He had stood up with clarity, spoken with calm finality, and walked away with his narrative unscathed. There was no rant, no scene, just silence that roared. For many viewers, it felt less like a celebrity moment and more like a man refusing to be misrepresented, off camera. Denzel remained focused on his long-standing work, quiet philanthropy, mentorship programs, and appearances rooted in service rather than spectacle. He made no attempt to capitalize on the moment, no dramatic interviews or online statements. His refusal to fan the flames only added gravity to what had occurred. It reinforced his long-standing philosophy: authenticity does not require validation from conflict. That single moment, one man rising from a crowded table and exiting on his terms, became symbolic of something far greater than a TV disagreement. It represented a shift in how boundaries are drawn in the public eye. And it reminded everyone watching that sometimes grace under fire isn't about enduring the heat. It's about knowing exactly when to walk out of it. Asterisk weeks later, Denzel Washington's quiet but powerful departure from The View continued to resonate in a media landscape hungry for spectacle but rarely prepared for substance. The clip had been shared millions of times, not because of fireworks or viral outrage, but because of its restraint, because Denzel had done what so few are willing to do on live television, maintain full control of his narrative without compromise. As more commentators weighed in, the discourse matured. It moved from initial shock to deeper reflections on media ethics, the treatment of black voices in mainstream platforms, and the limits of so-called tough questions when they border on condescension. Across talk shows, podcasts, and op-ed pages, Denzel's walk-off was reinterpreted again and again, not as avoidance, but as intentional redirection. It wasn't about escaping scrutiny. It was about refusing to let the setting distort the story. Asterisk inside the industry, the aftershocks were equally telling. Talent agents began advising their clients to demand clearer interview frameworks. Showrunners reviewed their approach to hard-hitting content. Even some networks initiated quiet internal discussions about consent, context, and tone during live conversations. Denzel, for his part, never returned to The View, but he didn't need to. His presence lingered not in the empty chair he left behind, but in the standards he raised simply by leaving it. Where others may have turned combative or theatrical, he turned composed and decisive. He didn't deliver a speech. He delivered an example. And in a media age defined by noise, it was Denzel's silence, his absence, his refusal to play along, that proved most unforgettable, asterisk, as months passed. The Denzel Washington, The View incident remained a reference point for a new kind of media moment, one not built on scandal, but on integrity. The industry tried to move on, but the public hadn't forgotten. College communications courses analyzed the exchange. Journalists debated the ethics of confrontation disguised as inquiry. Even longtime media professionals admitted they hadn't seen anything quite like it. A guest refusing to be cornered, not with anger, but with dignity, walking away not from pressure, but from a dynamic that no longer served the conversation. In interviews elsewhere, Denzel continued being Denzel-wise. Grounded, uninterested in rehashing. When asked indirectly about the moment, he only said, "Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is no." That single sentence, like his exit, needed no elaboration. Asterisk. Meanwhile, The View quietly adjusted its tone. The segments remained lively, but that sharp edge, especially when dealing with thoughtful guests, was softened. Co-hosts, whether intentionally or not, began leaving more space for dialogue instead of debate. It wasn't about becoming passive. It was about recognizing that meaningful conversation requires mutual respect. Denzel hadn't demanded that. He had demonstrated it. And by walking out, he taught the show, its audience, and even his critics that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in calmly, sets its own boundaries, and leaves before the room even realizes the temperature's changed. That's not a meltdown, that's mastery. And in a world still struggling to distinguish the two, Denzel made the difference. Crystal clear, asterisk, even in the absence of direct commentary. Denzel Washington's walk-off began to shape a larger cultural shift. Quietly but unmistakably, the incident prompted public figures, especially actors, activists, and thought leaders, to rethink their participation in confrontational media formats. Where once a viral moment was currency, now authenticity became the new standard. People began to ask, is this platform built for dialogue or is it built for spectacle? And increasingly, the answer to that question determined whether they showed up at all. In this new media atmosphere, Denzel's exit became shorthand, a signal for maintaining self-respect when the setting fails to match the substance. Interviews weren't just about exposure anymore, they were about alignment. If the host's intentions didn't honor that, many followed his lead. Decline, redirect, or, if necessary, walk out, asterisk. Behind the scenes, producers took notice. The incident served as a warning, not just about tone, but about consequence. Denzel hadn't burned bridges, he had illuminated them. He'd shown that walking away didn't end the conversation, it elevated it. And in doing so, he didn't just protect his legacy. He reshaped the rules of engagement for everyone watching. Because in a world obsessed with being seen, he reminded us that sometimes the most radical act is refusing to perform. Not out of pride, out of principle. And that simple, steady act of refusal delivered without fury, without spectacle, without a single raised voice echoed longer and louder than anything the cameras were expecting to capture that day. Asterisk.